Hello and welcome to the last What I Knit video for 2023. We made it, we survived, we got through another year of making, creating, all the things. Today we're going to talk about everything I made in November and December. Didn't make a video for November for a couple of reasons. For one, I didn't finish any of my projects, so I had no finished objects to show. I would just be updating you on the progress of a project that I mentioned in the last video. And then one of the other projects was a secret preview knit that I couldn't even talk about. So I felt like I didn't have enough content to necessitate a video, so I skipped it. So this video is going to cover November and December. I have, I believe, 4 finished objects to show and 2 whips. So let's talk about it. The first finished object that I completed in November was, oh wait, I didn't complete anything in November. That was my whole spiel, wasn't it? The first finished object I completed in December was a hat for my husband. I knit him a pattern called Ribelation by Anne Gagnon. She's the same designer of the 2x2 hat that I made for myself earlier this year. And I've made that hat several times. It wasn't until recently that I discovered she has a 1x1 pattern that's essentially the same, construction the same, the style of decreases are the same number of stitches. It is a one size pattern and it is free. So I knit that for my husband. He has been using it and wearing it. I don't know where it is right now, but I will hopefully show a picture of how that turned out. It was a really quick project. I almost forgot to mention it at all. I think it took me a week or so to complete from start to finish. I did a tubular cast on. I used the needle size recommended in the pattern. I used Barocco Vintage, which is a superwash yarn, in the color 5189 charcoal. And I bought that yarn, I don't know if it was this year or last year, but I bought it specifically to make him a hat. I had knit him a gray hat maybe a year or 2 ago in a non-superwash yarn. Patton's Classic Will Worsted leftover yarn from my Weekender sweater. He liked wearing it. It was warm, it was perfect, but I also knit him a black hat, the same hat in black. That was a superwash. The gray one wasn't a superwash. He got it mixed up and ended up felting the non-superwash one. So I just figure as a rule of thumb going forward, I'm only going to knit him superwash hats. He's been wearing it a lot, which makes me so happy. And it has inspired me to knit him something else, which led to another cast on that I'm going to talk about. And the next project I finished in December was a self-drafted pattern. This was a whip in the October video that I made. Yeah, I had just cast it on at the end of October, so you saw it in its very beginning stages. And here it is, all complete. This is, I use the Knitter's Guide, Knitter's Handbook for Top-Down Sweaters. I'll pop a picture of the book cover and what that looks like. And I actually made a video taking you guys through my experience making this sweater. And yeah, this is how it turned out. So I used that book for all of the stitch counts and the placement of the increases and everything. I created the color work motif myself, and I mean, all things considered, it's a very basic top-down circular yoke sweater. I'm really happy with how it turned out. I tried the ladder back jacker technique for the first time in this project. I'm not a huge fan of it. It's just fiddly to do. But what I also learned with this project is that I just don't like color work. Like, I don't like stranded color work. And I don't know how many stranded color work projects are in my future, because not to say that this was such a horrible experience. I mean, as far as color work goes, this is a very, very easy pattern. It wasn't super intricate. I didn't even bother making a chart for this pattern. Very, very simple, very straightforward. It's just the mechanics of it and using the 2 colors at a time. It just wasn't my favorite thing. When I first learned color work and I made my first color work sweater, I did 2-handed color work. So 1 color would be in each hand. But with this one, I started off that way, but eventually I just started knitting both colors with my dominant hand and just dropping and switching for every color change. That wasn't such a headache because there are sort of larger sections of each color. But if I had done that on a more intricate pattern, like the first color work pattern that I knit, where I'm liable to be switching every other stitch in a given round, I think that would have been nightmarish and really traumatizing and just overall unenjoyable. But this, it was a little bit more manageable. And, you know, I don't know, I feel bad to say I don't like color work. Like, that's such a strong statement, but I gotta say it's not my favorite thing to knit. Give me cables or lace or some type of knit purl texture any day. Color work is firmly at the bottom of my list. That could change. I could develop more of a preference for knitting it. And it's not even that I don't like the way color work looks. A lot of color work, not my favorite, but there are some color work patterns out there that I find visually appealing. I would wear it, looks great. It's just the act of knitting it is not my favorite thing, and that's okay. For this project, it was totally worth it. I will link below in the description box, as well as in a card up above, the video that I made that sort of documented the journey of making this. But it is really a straightforward project. As you can see under the arms here, I didn't sort of map out the color work perfectly. So there is an interruption in the pattern on the sleeve under the arm, but it is under the arm. And when I'm wearing it, unless I'm standing like this or I have my arms up, you can't even notice. And it is symmetrical. So even once you notice, you realize, okay, that it looks intentional. It doesn't look like a mistake. So I'm okay with it. My ladder back jacquard did leave some holes. So right when I started, like on that setup row, may not be super visible here, but there are some holes. I may or may not go back and duplicate stitch over them to make it more subtle, but as of now, it doesn't bother me too much, and it is, the holes happen at the same place in every repeat. So in that regard, it looks intentional, and I'm less inclined to do anything to fix it. I'm just kind of living with it. Yeah, I did twisted rib on all of the trims. The yarn I used was Blue Sky Fibers Woolstock Worsted in the color Gravel Road and Highland Fleece. And I can't remember if I mentioned it in this video in particular, but I did knit this in an effort to replicate a store-bought sweater that I had in my collection for many, many years and that I didn't love the fit of. And overall, this project, it was a success, and I'm really happy that I was able to complete it. I had sort of an unofficial deadline of being able to complete this before like mid-December. I wanted it to be my Christmas sweater, even though I didn't end up wearing that on Christmas. I totally forgot, but I did wear it to my job's or my team's holiday party, and yeah, it was perfect. So the next project I finished in December is the sweater that I'm wearing. So this is the Westward Sweater by Taylor Harris, and it is designed in Woolfolk Tige. Oh, I should have looked at the pronunciation. Hold on. Toe? Whatever. That's the yarn. That's the yarn I used. Taylor Harris, who's the designer of this pattern, reached out to me asking if I was interested in preview knitting, and that Woolfolk would send me the yarn free of charge. All I had to do was knit the pattern, post about it on social media. Very, very low stakes. And I got a free sweater quantity of particularly expensive yarn. In fact, they sent me 11 balls, 5 of the navy blue color no, 6 of the navy blue color and 5 of the gray color at $21 US a ball times 11 balls. That would have cost me $231 US, not to mention tax, not to mention shipping, to make this sweater if I were to purchase the yarn myself. And that is a steep sticker price. And I think that is part of why Woolfolk sponsors yarn for their preview knits. I assume this is standard practice, but I agreed to preview knit it, and yeah, it was a fairly pleasant experience. The pattern had already been tested and tech edited. There were no mistakes. There was no expectation for me to find mistakes or provide any feedback to the designer or to Woolfolk. So it really wasn't no strings. I just had to knit the pattern. And although I hadn't sort of gone into November thinking, hey, I'm going to knit this huge sweater that I wasn't planning to, I'm glad I did, because it was an overall really pleasant experience. This is a mohair and merino blend. It is very warm, and it has such a halo to it. It's almost like I'm glowing, which is really cool. I don't generally gravitate towards mohair, if I'm being honest. I think mohair is a little bit overdone in this space. It has its merits. I like the drape, I like the texture, I like how warm it is. Some mohairs I find to be itchy. I've only used mohair twice before now, and both of those projects were vests, and I find them itchy. This I don't find itchy, which is a huge plus. But mohair is a look. It's a very specific look, and in a lot of sort of settings, scenarios, mohair doesn't make sense. It's not the most practical thing to wear. So this I would definitely consider a statement sweater. I'm glad the colors themselves are colors that I like and, you know, wear generally speaking, but the fuzz factor is a lot. So this in many ways took me out of my comfort zone. This is not the type of yarn that I would gravitate towards normally. So I'm glad I had the opportunity to try it by way of this preview knit, because if I'm totally honest, I don't know if I would have spent the $230 to knit this project myself. But that said, I don't know. This project may have given me a slight change of heart on mohair. I was very much in the mind of mohair is not for me, mohair is overplayed, everybody's using it. And in a lot of ways, I still do feel that way, especially the whole fingering weight held double with a mohair. So overall, I'm very happy with how this project turned out. And I'm really grateful that Taylor reached out to me to do the preview knit. And this has helped me expand my horizons, try a new yarn brand that I hadn't tried before, and maybe sort of lessen my negative opinion of mohair a little bit. This pattern is knit top down. It is a drop shoulder construction. One thing that was a little bit concerning when I started this project is there is no shoulder shaping. Like none at all. So you cast on the stitches for the back, and then you pick up stitches for the front, and then you continue knitting down. Nowhere here is there any short row shaping. I think a lot of that might have to do with the mosaic knitting pattern, because this is, by the way, mosaic. I feel like I'm missing a lot of key details. This is mosaic color work, and that just means that you are working with one yarn at a time, and for the color work bits, you are slipping the contrast color from the previous row. Some variation of that. That's mosaic knitting. And it was a very simple motif overall, easy to memorize. There was no chart was necessary. It was very straightforward and effective. I think it has a really cool checkered graphic pattern, and I like that the high contrast sort of makes the color work pop. But yeah, no short row shaping, which is really concerning. I had knit a few drop shoulder projects before this, all of which had short row shaping in the shoulders to add that sort of sloping shape, that sloping effect to the shoulders. And I think in general, it helps the shoulder sort of lay a little more naturally, especially at the hem. There is a little bit of a tinting action that happens here. I don't know how obvious it is, but I think that has a lot to do with the lack of short row shaping. But overall, it still has a really good fit. Like, I think drop shoulders in general are a lot more forgiving than other construction styles. So I was skeptical at the start, but I figured it could work. I decided, you know what, we're gonna power through and give it a fair chance. And when I realized that there was no short row shaping, I did a little bit of research on Ravelry, scoping out other drop shoulder designs. I know Andrea Mowry has at least one that doesn't have short row shaping, and I'm pretty sure that pattern also features mosaic knitting. So I think the mosaic knitting provides some limitations in terms of shaping. It would be difficult to incorporate effective short rows in a pattern like this without having sort of a wedge of sort of the plain color that might stand out a little bit more than what is desired. At this, I'm only speculating. I never asked the designer, hey, why didn't you do any shoulder shaping? But if I had to guess, that's probably why. And overall, I'm happy with the fit. So it's leading me to believe that short row shaping on shoulders for drop shoulders is more of a nice to have, less of a necessity. Okay, so I went on and on about how I might have had a change of heart on mohair, at least wearing mohair. This is pretty comfortable. It's hot. I am sweating under this, but I'm also indoors, so take that however you need to. But knitting with it, not my favorite. The dark color didn't help. It was very hard to see my stitches, not a lot of stitch definition, more difficult to read my knitting. And on the sections where I was knitting flat back and forth and I was purling on the wrong side, horrible. I don't like purling with this yarn. I can say that with 100% confidence. I do not like purling with this yarn. But it was a means to an end, and the finished product is worth it. I have said this before, but I am primarily a product knitter. So my main motivation to get me through the most difficult bits of a project are, how awesome is it going to be to wear this at the end of the day? And if the answer is super awesome, then I power through. And if the answer is, it's not even going to be that good, then it basically kills my motivation. So being the product knitter that I am, I persevered. I persevered through purling with this yarn. I persevered through not being able to read my knitting or see my stitches. I persevered through weeks and weeks of having to use my neck light, because when I knit in the evenings, this was impossible to see the dark, the navy yarn. So, you know, shout out to me. Okay, I did that. So yes, this is the Westward Sweater by Taylor Harris. Moving right along, a pair of socks. So this is my November and December socks. This is the Decathlon pattern. It's a free pattern on Ravelry. I will link it below. I do not remember the designer's name. I was a little bit concerned because I thought I was not going to finish this project in time before the new year in December to sort of officially successfully complete my 1 sock a month goal, but luckily I did finish and I'm really happy. So main color is Duchess of Dye Pots. Can't remember the yarn base. The color is Yeti. It's a really nice tweed yarn in a cream color. And the toe, I used some leftover yarn from a previous sock project. Both of these colors I used in my Cider House socks. These, they're in my dirty sock hamper. These socks feature both of the yarns in this sock. So yeah, they're complete. I finished it a couple of days ago. I kind of just powered through and totally completed it. And the reason I was a little concerned, I gave myself more than enough time. However, I was just, after finishing this sweater, I was really just gung-ho about a new sweater. I just felt naked because I didn't have a sweater project going or a garment project going or a larger project that I was super excited about. And to only have the socks, I was just yearning to start a new project. So I did that. I took a couple of days off these socks and I cast on a whip that I'll talk about. All that to say, I cast on a sweater, hit a little bit of a roadblock, and I had no other choice but to work on these. It was a blessing in disguise. And I knocked these out and completed them right in the nick of time. And yeah, that makes 6 total socks for 2023, 1 sock a month, 6 total pairs of socks, 1 sock a month. And I'm really, really proud of myself for that. And I cannot wait to wear these. I already know these are going to be super comfortable. I know they fit perfectly, and yeah. Okay, so this was a spontaneous cast on. This, I had more or less decided would be my first garment of 2024. However, after completing the Westward and agonizing to start a new project, I swatched. I swatched for the Ferry building sweater by Sloan Rosenthal, which is another drop shoulder, but it is seamed, knit in pieces and seamed together. And this is as far as I got. This is about an hour of work. This is all I have to show for it. I am using Hudson and West Weld in the color Lake, which is a nice blue color. Clearly we have this thing going. It's a nice medium blue. Like the color a lot. Excited about the project. So yeah, I swatched with a 3.5 millimeter needle, which is the needle size that the pattern calls for. My gauge in the unblocked swatch was perfect. So I blocked it and I kind of didn't look at it again and decided, you know what, I met gauge, I'm casting on. And that's how I got how far I got. But after measuring my gauge in the blocked swatch, I realized that my gauge went from the 26 that the pattern calls for to 25 stitches. And 1 stitch off in a 4-inch measurement doesn't sound like a lot, but if you extrapolate that over the course of an entire sweater, it could result in a hugely different size sweater than the intended measurements. And I didn't want to risk it. I kind of went back and forth and thought, you know what, I'll just power ahead, do what I have to do. But something in me said, I need to swatch again. So I swatched again on a 3.25 millimeter needle. I forgot to measure my gauge before blocking, but my gauge after blocking was exactly the 26 stitches that I needed. The problem is that 3.25 is what I cast on with, and that was going to be the needle size that I knit the ribbing in. And now that I've remeasured my new gauge, my needle size ribbing should logically be the 3 millimeter instead of the 3.25. I don't have a 3mm needle. I only have the 3.25 and it jumps down to a 2.75mm. That is the sizing sort of gap that the Chiaogu needles come in. To be fair, it's like the 2.75mm, is a US 2 and the 3.25 is a US 3. I never say US needle size numbers because it is all made up. It doesn't make sense. It's totally illogical, because why is jumping from 2.75 to 3.25 a whole size up, but jumping from 3.25 to 3.5 is also a whole size up? Like, pick one. Units of measure are supposed to mean something, are they not? So I ignore US crochet sizing and US knitting needle sizing because much like the imperial measurement system, I feel like the powers that be just dig their heels in and decided, you know what? No, we are not going to conform to the literal rest of the world. Anyway, I don't have a 3mm needle. My interchangeable set skips the 3mm. I thought, okay, I could go down to a 2.75mm needle and continue the ribbing on that size needle, but it just seemed like it might be too big of a gap and my ribbing would be a lot tighter than it should be. I think going from a 3.25 in the main fabric down to a 3mm needle for the ribbing makes sense. And that is the millimeter difference in the pattern as written. And I really want to stay true to the pattern in the ways that make sense. I'm honoring the construction. I'm honoring the whole gauge situation. I want to do right by this pattern. So I decided I needed to just order a 3mm needle tip that will fit my interchangeable sets. But anyway, as I was going through all of this and having this epiphany, the sweater was effectively on hold. I decided I'm not going to move forward on it until I decide how I want to move forward on it. And that is either continuing with the 2.75mm to complete the ribbing or putting it on hold and waiting for my 3mm to get here, which is what I ultimately decided to do. And so once I reached that conclusion, I decided, okay, there's nothing else I can do. I'll just finish the sock. So I finished that sock, the December sock, yesterday morning. And then yesterday evening, I cast on my next whip that I'll talk to you about, which is another sock. Yes, I cast this on last night. I'm as shocked and appalled as you are. Here it is. Whole leg is complete. We are halfway through the heel flap of this sock. It's a 3x1 ribbed sock. We love it. You can't see it because the lighting is awful. Let's move you closer. Let's get us both closer to the light here. Okay, that should be better. This is where we are. 80 rounds in the leg of 3x1 rib. And I'm doing a typical slip stitch heel flap. That's where I am. And this is a sock for my husband. I have 2 pairs of socks planned. And this will be the first one. I'm hoping to have both pairs finished by our obsolete anniversary in March, which is just the anniversary of us dating. We will have been together for 10 years. 10 whole years. That's like a third of my life. Wow. Wow. Okay. So yeah, this is coming along really nicely. Really happy about it. And not much to say. I am following the instructions from the Summerlee I'm So Basic socks. I made that sock pattern so many times and it's my go-to when I'm making a simple sock, vanilla sock, or in this case, a simple ribbed sock. So the plan is to continue with the 3x1 rib over the top of the foot, and everything else will be as written in the Summerlee pattern. So yeah, I cast this on last night and it's like 4 p.m. the next day, and this is where I am. So we started real strong on that project. Those are all of my projects from November and December. I'm 98% sure I have not missed anything as far as my knitting. So now we can move into the stash numbers, the final stash number update of 2023. I will break down November and December's numbers. October numbers had a little bit of an edit, so I figured you'll see on the screen what the actual real numbers are, but I think in my last What I Knit video that the numbers were wrong for October, sorry. But yes, in November, I brought 300 yards into my stash, which reminds me, I didn't mention this. My friend Felicia went to Rhinebeck this year. She brought me 1 skein of DK weight yarn. I'll pop in a picture. I think I know what I'm gonna make with that. It was a very generous and thoughtful gift of her, and I gladly accepted that yarn into my stash. So, oh my gosh, yes, in November, I got 300 yards. I didn't finish any finished objects, so nothing got reduced out of stash for the purposes of this tracker. And in December, I reduced my stash by 4,248 yards. So that includes the 3 finished objects that I talked about in this video, but it also includes 4 skeins of fingering weight yarn. I think it's the Fiber Company Amble. I'll pop a picture of it, and I successfully destashed that, and I sold it to a fellow knitter who's in this private group that I'm a part of. So I'm right in the nick of time. I literally ran it to the post office yesterday. So I was really excited to be able to include that in my tracker. And then I didn't acquire any yarn in December. So my totals for the entire year, I have reduced my stash. So the yarn that has left my stash has been 17,015 yards. And the yarn that has come into my stash this year is 5,057 yards. And my net stash reduction is 11,958 yards. You guys, I am so proud of myself. I'm not surprised. I tend to be very steadfast and self-driven on things like this, but I'm proud. Wow, I did that. I will reserve my thoughts because I would like to do a video, a 2023 knitting and review video, where I talk a little bit about the projects that I've made, but more than anything, I'd like to reflect on my experience with the no-buy, what the future of the no-buy will look like. So I will spare going too much into that, and I'll just leave those numbers with you, and we can just celebrate them together. That's all we need to do. We don't need to therapize. We don't need to postulate. We don't need a monologue about what a long and arduous journey, and I built character, I was resilient, I was steadfast, I wasn't always motivated, but I was consistent, and that is what matters. It's not that deep, but I am really happy about it, and we can just leave it at that for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.